Welcome back to another episode of the End Time series. Uh, the previous two episodes, we are dealing now with the Olivet Discourse that we find in Matthew chapter 24 and 25. And we already saw Matthew 24 and we saw the interpretations there. I hope you have been blessed by that. And today I'm going to the second part of the Olivet Discourse, that is chapter 25. We should know that chapter 25 is also quite misunderstood and thus misinterpreted. Few days back, I posted an article concerning this. I mean that's the same thing I'm going to teach today. So I'm going to do this Matthew chapter 25 in two episodes. Please bear with me. The reason for the two episodes is what I'm going to tell now. In the previous Facebook post, a few days back that I put, I didn't see anybody commenting or anything. So that's the reason I am telling that, when people tell something, people tend to believe it blindly. I had put that post in order for you to have a critical thinking and see if what I have told, what I have interpreted there is the right thing or was the wrong one. But I didn't see anybody, so I gather that you believe that what I told. But at the end of it, I told you to watch a video that I had attached to it. It is a Galilean wedding. So if you had watched that, you would have understood that what I had interpreted and what the video speaks are two different things. So I had titled that one as Matthew 25, a critical approach, and that's what I am going to do today. I just want to point out how we can misinterpret something from the passage, some passages from the Bible, according to our thinking, or because we have been influenced by somebody else or someone else's writing, or maybe the Bible college that we have studied. All that comes into play when we tend to interpret the Bible, which is actually the wrong way of approaching it. But it does not mean that you do not have to go and read every single person's writings in order to understand what the Bible actually speaks about. So there are two interpretations that we see in Matthew chapter 25, and I am going to do the one today, and the second one I will do in the next episode. I just want to show how we can misinterpret it, and in the second episode I will counter that one, and I will tell you the actual fact of what this interpretation stands for. It is for your critical thinking that I am doing this. Matthew 25 is also a chapter that is quite misunderstood and thus misinterpreted, especially the parable of the 10 virgins. That's a message that we have heard quite often. So what does Jesus speak through the two parables? He explains about the judgment that is going to happen to the Jewish nation and the nations at the time of the tribulation. Please note that I am speaking from the first interpretation's point of view. So I don't think that I am supporting that, but in the beginning itself, I just want to point out where we can go wrong. In order to understand that, we have to understand the context to which Jesus is speaking about. So we have to know what the context Jesus is speaking about. From chapter 25 verse 1 to 30 is speaking about the coming judgment of Israel during the 7 years of tribulation. From 25 verse 31 to 46 is speaking about the judgment of the Gentiles during the 7 years of tribulation. Interpreting these verses in the context of the church is saying that the church will go through the tribulation, post-tribulation rapture. My goal is not to argue about that here, as that is not the issue. My aim is to give a clear understanding of the passages that Jesus was speaking about. So I am purely speaking from the perspective of this first interpretation. If I hold to that or not, you will know in the second episode. Verses 25, 1 to 30. The chapter begins, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the groom." This is how chapter 25 begins. Then the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the groom. It begins by the word "then," which shows that there is a link to chapter 24, a continuation of what Jesus was speaking in the previous chapter. So we should understand that between chapters there is a connecting factor. If there is a connecting factor between two chapters, that means that two chapters are speaking about the same thing in a continuation. So Jesus, in the previous chapter, he was telling about his second coming, the signs of his second coming, and the signs of the end of the ages. And now he is coming to another part where he is specifying the people who are during that period that Jesus was speaking in chapter 24. So that's why the chapter begins with the word "then." It's a continuation of what Jesus was speaking in the previous chapter. Chapter 24, verse 37 to 51, Jesus spoke of Noah's time prior to the flood and parable of the faithful servant. So Jesus was showing that there was going to be a separation of people that will take place during the tribulation period. One group, the grace of entering the millennium, and the other to eternal judgment at the white throne judgment. So this is what mainly Jesus is speaking there. So in chapter 25, Jesus continues with the separation process. So this particular interpretation says that in chapter 25, Jesus continues with the separation process, but now he is specifying the people who are being separated. From verses 1 to 30, Jesus is speaking about the nation Israel, both the parable of the 10 virgins and that of the parable of the talents. So in chapter 25 we see two parables. One is the parable of the 10 virgins and the second is the parable of the talents. So you decide what this actual interpretation is. Verses 1 to 30. This is where the parable of the 10 virgins we see. These verses are speaking about the separation of the Jews living at the time of Christ's second coming, the end of the tribulation, as the context clearly points to that event that is seen in chapter 24, verse 3, verse 14, verse 27, verse 30, verse 39, verse 44, and verse 51. Israel will be judged as a nation at Christ's glorious return, as seen in Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 30 to 44, and Zechariah 13, verse 1. So this is what this interpretation. This is the interpretation that one interpretation that Jesus is speaking about to his disciples, answering to the question of when will be the sign of your coming and when will be the sign of the end of the ages. So Jesus is coming to chapter 25 and telling them in parables about the separations and what is going to happen during that time. So that what Jesus is meaning is that Israel will be judged as a nation at Christ's glorious return, as seen in Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 30 to 44, and Zechariah chapter 13, verse 1. Why do I tell this? Because Zechariah 13, 8 to 9 says, "It will come about in all the land, declares the Lord. 2 parts in it will be cut off and perish, but the third will be left alive. And I will bring the third part through the fire, refine them as silver is refined, and test them as gold is tested. They call on my name, and I will listen and answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is my God. This is Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8 to 9. We know that during the time of the tribulation, 2/3 of the people of Israel will die at the hands of the Antichrist. It is the 1/3 that they will recognize the Messiah, and they are the ones who will be chased into the wilderness, and they'll have protection in Petra. We saw in the previous episode that Petra is in Basra and Jordan. So this is what that separation is speaking about, is what this one interpretation speaks about. That is, this is speaking purely from a Jewish angle, from the nation Israel, and God is going to separate, or Jesus is going to separate them, the one that will enter into the millennium and one that will go to eternal judgment. So that's what this is speaking about. This is what this interpretation tells. This is what Jesus is speaking about in the parable of the 10 virgins. So what is the scene of the 10 virgins? We know it's a wedding banquet or a wedding. In the King James version, it is wedding. So we know it is a wedding. That means the wedding has already taken place, and it is feast time, which according to Jewish and Galilean custom during Jesus' time has taken place at the bride's house. So we know Jewish and Galilean custom, the wedding takes place at the bride's house, and the wedding feast takes place in the bridegroom's house. After the wedding at the bride's house, the bridegroom brings his bride with all the fanfare to his house for the wedding feast, to his newly built addition to his father's house. This is purely a Galilean wedding scenario that Jesus is portraying through this parable. So this is exactly what Jesus is speaking. And so, in light of that, this particular interpretation of the 10 virgins is speaking about the Jewish nation being separated. One will enter into the millennium and one will enter into judgment. So who are the 10 virgins? They are the representation of the people of Israel, both the wise virgins and the foolish virgins. So this is what this interpretation speaks about. Here Jesus as king is coming back to this earth with his bride, the church, in order to enter into the millennium. So that is the scene that we are introduced into chapter 25. Israel is waiting for their Messiah, who they expect to come as the king. That is what they have been expecting. They expected a Messiah to come who will sit on the throne of David and judge the nations and bring them freedom from their oppressors around them. So we know that during the tribulation, Israel will know that Jesus is coming, but not all of them will be spiritually prepared. So we know that 7 years of tribulation, who is living in that 7 years of tribulation, if you are a Bible-believing person during that time, you will understand that you are living in the exact time frame of the second coming of Jesus Christ. So we know that during the tribulation, Israel will know that Jesus is coming, but not all of them will be spiritually prepared. That's what the 5 wise virgins and 5 foolish virgins is speaking about, is what this interpretation tells. This is the context of the 10 virgins with the lamps and the oil. It is the 5 wise virgins who are actually prepared with extra oil as the bridegroom was tarrying. We know what happened in that parable. The bridegroom's coming from the bride's home to his own home was delayed, and because of that delay, these 10 virgins were waiting there, and some of them they went to sleep, and moreover we know that 5 wise virgins had extra oil for their lamps in case the bridegroom tarries or delays. They will have enough oil to wait for him to come. But the foolish virgins did not have extra oil, and so if that tarrying was happening, that means they would not be prepared for that. The 5 foolish virgins were not prepared, and when the time came, they had to run for oil and miss the entry to the banquet. So they missed the entry into the banquet. As Zechariah prophesied, only 1/3 will enter the millennium with their physical body. The rest, 2/3, will die at the hands of the Antichrist, because they once again rejected the Messiah. Since the day and hour of Jesus' return is unknown, it is necessary to be like the wise virgins who were well prepared. So here again, only a small group of Jews actually believed that the Messiah is coming. The rest, they just went with the flow. So that's what this interpretation is telling them, and that's the reason why that separation is going on. Only 1/3 will enter into the millennium, and 2/3 will die at the hands of Antichrist, according to Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8 to 9. Then the next is verses 14 to 30. Here Jesus is speaking about faithfulness. I mean, the talents. Now the interpretation, we saw that from verses 1 to 30 is speaking about the Jewish nation. So the second parable is the parable of the talents. We know a master, he was going to a far off country, and he knew that there will be a delay in coming back. So he gave his goods, that means talents, to his servants. To one servant he gave 5, to another servant he gave 2, and to another servant he gave 1, according to their capabilities. So that's how that was given. And the master expected, when he comes back, that these servants would be faithful in handling the money and reinvesting it, or making it double, and by the time they come back, by the time he comes back. So that is what is here, what is speaking about. Here Jesus is speaking about faithfulness. How faithful are we in the talents that God has given us, in the things that God has given us? How faithful are we? That is what is spoken here. As God's own people, the people of Israel was to be faithful in serving their king, their future Messiah that was promised through the prophets. This is the interpretation that, one interpretation that is in support, that chapter 25 verses 1 to 30 is speaking about the Jewish nation. So this is what they are telling, that is, as God's own people, the people of Israel was to be faithful in serving the king, the future Messiah that was promised through the prophets. So they were supposed to be faithfully living what the king wanted them to live like, according to the statutes and the commandments that was laid down for them to live. They were supposed to live accordingly as the people of God. It was through the Jewish nation that God was going to bless the rest of the nation, as promised to their forefather Abraham. That is, he knew all the nations are going to be blessed. They were the guardians of that promise, and that they were supposed to be faithfully executing. So this is, we know that through Abraham all the nations of the world were going to be blessed. So that's the reason why God, in that eternal covenant with Abraham, said, those who bless you, I will bless them. Those who curse you, I will curse them. So that is what is being spoken here. That is, Israel was supposed to be that blessing which was promised to their forefather Abraham, and they were supposed to be the guardians of that promise. How can they be the guardians of that promise? They have to be faithful to him in their day-to-day life, not wavering away from the faith and going and worshipping other gods. But they rejected God and followed the world by worshipping other gods and living an immoral life, for which God had to punish them and scatter them from their own land. So, this is one interpretation of Matthew chapter 24, verse 1 to 30. So, the same interpretation tells that there is an application part that we can derive from that. That means there is an application part even to the church believers. So, what is the application aspect from these two parables? The first parable of the 10 virgins speaks about a readiness in the bridegroom coming to take his bride, the church, which is called the rapture, for the wedding ceremony that will be in heaven during the tribulation. The bride of Christ is like the 5 wise virgins who had extra oil for their lamp in case the bridegroom tarries. Those who are left behind are like the 5 foolish virgins who did not have extra oil for their lamps, as they were just professing Christians who did not believe in the rapture. So, this is the application part of the 10 virgins. That's what this interpretation tells. So, they tell that this is not speaking about the church, but it is speaking about the people of Israel. In the next episode, in the second part of this, I will tell you the actual fact about it. If this interpretation is right or wrong, we'll see later. But now I am leaving it to you to critically examine what I am telling is right or wrong. If this interpretation is right or wrong, what you have to know is that this interpretation has been followed and has been propagated by eminent scholars of theology. I'm not going to name anybody, but they hold to this view that the 10 verse, chapter 25 from verse 1 to 30 speaks about the Jewish nation. So, how prepared are we to receive the bridegroom when he comes to take his bride? That is the question there in the application part. How prepared are we to receive the bridegroom? The second parable of the talents speaks about how faithful we are with what God has entrusted us with. That's what the second parable is speaking about. Each one of us have been given talents to use for the glory of God on high. God knows each one of our capacity, and it is according to that our God has blessed us with those talents. That's what the parable of the talents is speaking about. How faithful are we with what we have been entrusted with? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves. It is not that God has been partial in giving us those talents which may be less than the others. That is because He knows who we are and do not want to put a heavy burden on us that we cannot carry, or rather give us a responsibility that is too much for us to bear. That is why in that parable it is told that one was given 5, the other one was given 2, the other one was given 1. So it was according to their capacity and their ability to carry out the work that was entrusted to them. This is what is speaking, what it is referring to. Because the master knew exactly these three servants. He knew exactly what their capacities and what their abilities were. And he was a good master, and he did not want to burden them with a heavy burden as the people of this world usually does. Especially when you look at the insurance companies, how they tax their their agents into giving a target which is way high than their capacity of from where they came from, and their influence, or the number of people group that they are having contact with, without realizing that they tax these people, because what the insurance company is looking is for their own benefit. And when it comes to giving to the insurers, not the agents, the insurers. If I take an insurance to me, I usually end up on the losing side in many of this insurance policy. But here, the master knows exactly the capacity and the capabilities of these servants, and he has given them the responsibility in such a way. That is because he knows who we are and do not want to put a heavy burden on us that we cannot carry. That is, give us a responsibility that is for us not being able to bear it. But he promised that if we are faithful with the little things he gives us, he will bless us with greater things. That is the moral of that parable. That means if we are faithful with the little things that God gives us, according to our capabilities and capacities, God is an all-knowing God, and he knows who we are, and he knows how much we are able to do. And if we are faithful in that what he has entrusted us with, he is willing to bless us with greater things. How faithful are we with the talents God has given us? If we are not faithful, it will be taken away from us, as we see in that parable. The servant who did not invest and doubled that talents that was given. You should understand the talents that is speaking here in this parable is silver. And during Jesus' time, that silver, 1 talent of silver weighed almost 50 to 80 pounds. So you can calculate in the present day how much that much 80 pounds of silver costs. So that 1 talent costs that much. So we will come in the next episode, the second part of this, we'll go into more details about that. This is the application part that they are telling about the 2 parables, the 10 virgins and the talents. And here they are telling both of this is speaking about the Jews. So you assess. You critically think if that is true or not. If you hold on to it, wait for the next part, the second part, where I will critically explain to you the actual interpretation of chapter 25. Verses 31 to 46 is the next part. These verses speaks about the judgment of the nations. What is the time these verses are speaking about? So these verses from verse 31 to 46 of chapter 25 speaks about the judgment of nations. So what is the time these verses are speaking about? So verse 31 says, "But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and majesty and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory." Verse 31. So this clearly speaks about the end of the tribulation, as it speaks about Jesus coming in all his glory and majesty with his angels with him. Verses 31, the first part. Means this is clearly speaking about the end of the tribulation. It speaks about Jesus coming in all his glory and majesty with his angels with him. So we see that happening in Revelation chapter 19, where Jesus is going to come back to this earth. That's the second coming, literal second coming, where all eyes will see Jesus Christ riding on a white horse with angels and saints. That means with the bride of Christ there and the Old Testament saints riding on white horses. So we are that is the last days of the tribulation. So verse 31, the second part, speaks about the great white throne judgment as seen in Revelation chapter 20 verse 11 to 15. So that is the judgment that we are seeing here. So all the nations will be gathered before him for judgment. This verse is 32 to 33 I am reading from the Amplified Version. All the nations will be gathered before him for judgment, and he will separate them for one another as a shepherd separates his sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right, the place of honor, and the goats on his left, the place of rejection. That's verse 32 to 33. As I am reading from the Amplified Version. This speaks about how Jesus is going to separate the nations for the blessing and judgment of the nations present during the tribulations. We know that. This is the nations that's going to be separated as sheep and goats. Uh, that's what chapter 25, verse 31 to 46 speaks about, the sheep and the goats. So here Jesus speaks about two groups of people which we know. One group called the sheep and the other called the goats. Sheep are separated to the right and the goats to the left, which we see in that verse. Verses 34 to 40 is speaking about the sheep. Now Jesus tells about the qualification to the inheritance of the blessing of the sheep. Sheep on the right will be called to the inheritance of God, God's kingdom. Verse 34. The qualification is clearly seen from verses 35 to 40, much specified in verse 40. The king will answer and say, this is verse 40, I am reading from the Amplified Version. The king will answer and say to them, I assure you and most solemnly say to you, to the extent that you did it for one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it for me. This is the Amplified Version. Jesus clearly speaks about these brothers of mine, which is the qualifying factors of the sheep being allowed into the millennium by Jesus in their physical bodies. We know that the sheep will enter into the millennium. That group of people will enter into the millennium in their physical body, and they will procreate. So who are these brothers of mine Jesus is referring to? So who are these brothers other than the sheep and the goats? So we know that apart from the sheep and goats, there is a third group of people. It could only be a third group, and they are the Jews. That means the nation Israel. That is the Jewish people are what Jesus is referring to in verse 40 as these brothers of mine. Why I tell that? It is because the Jews are Jesus' physical brothers from the earthly sense, because he was born from the tribe of Judah. So what period is Jesus referring to? It is the period of the tribulation when the nations, the sheep, risk their lives to protect the Jews from the persecution of the Antichrist. We know this is exactly what's going to happen, because the Antichrist in the second half of the tribulation is going to persecute the Jewish people. And it is a group of people who are referred to as sheep here that qualifies to enter into the millennium are the ones who had protected the Jews there. In order for these people to do that, do that is because they are of the Christian faith. We should understand that during that period, during the tribulation period, also there are believers who will realize that they had missed the rapture. They had missed the rapture, and what all their loved ones and their pastor had told, and the church had told, and the church members had told was absolutely true, and now they realize what the Bible spoke was 100% correct, and now they will find faith during that time. But it's a difficult time. Many of them will be martyred, and many of them will survive through that tribulation period, and they will be eligible to enter into the millennium. So that's what Jesus is speaking about here. But the qualification for them to enter the millennium kingdom was not because they were saved. You should understand that is not what the underlying message is there. But because they are willing to risk their lives to save the Jews. So when we tell that that was not the qualification of being saved, it means that is not what the qualification Jesus told for them to the sheep, for them to enter into the millennium. The qualification that was there was that because they were willing to risk their life to save the Jews. That was the qualification factor. This has a similar ring with the narration of Corrie ten Boom, a Dutch writer, who narrates how she, her father and her sister saved many Jews from the Nazi Holocaust and finally had to go to a Nazi concentration camp. So you should understand. It has almost a reference to that incident. It's uh, it's a book written by Corrie ten Boom. It's called, I think, The Hiding Place. There's a movie also that has come out with that. She's a Dutch writer. That means she was living in Holland during the time of the Second World War, and during that period when Hitler was persecuting and killing martyring the Jews or massacring the Jews, this family took the pain in saving some Jews, and finally they were thrown into a concentration camp of the Nazis. These saints of the tribulation are the ones who survived the Antichrist Holocaust. So these saints, the sheep, that means Jesus is referring to as the sheep, are the saints who will survive through that Holocaust of the tribulation. Verse 41 to 46. Then he will say to those on his left, "Leave me, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels," demons. Verse 41. Amplified version I read. These are speaking about the goats on the left. What is their qualification for judgment? Then he'll reply to them, "I assure you and most solemnly say to you, to the extent that you did not do it for one of the least of these, my followers, you did not do it for me." Verse 45 in the Amplified version. So what is Jesus referring to? Jesus is referring to the people who lived through the tribulation, who did not protect the Jews by giving them over to the authorities of the Antichrist to kill them. Verses 41 to 46 has a parallel passage with Matthew chapter 7 verse 21 to 33, part of the Beatitudes of Jesus Christ. So let me read those verses. I am reading from the Amplified version. "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, when I judge them, 'Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, and driven out demons in your name, and done many miracles in your name?' And then I will declare to them publicly, 'I never knew you. Depart from me. You are banished from my presence, you who act wickedly, disregarding my commandments.'" So these people at the judgment day are cast into the lake of fire. So this is the interpretation of chapter 25. What I am presenting here is you should understand there are two kinds of interpretations or two kinds of views to chapter 25 of Matthew. And what you hold is what that is up to you. But what I am trying to show you is that we have to critically read the scripture and understand what Jesus is referring to by comparing with other passages in the Bible. So is the application aspect of verses 31 to 46. So is there an application to us believers from verse 31 to 46? So there's an application part. With this interpretation, there's an application part for the believers too. Yes, definitely. We also have our responsibilities as a church to be praying for the nation Israel, which is absolutely true. We Christians are supposed to be praying for the nation Israel. Their enemies are trying to annihilate them from the face of the earth. We should understand that we the Christians, we the believers, have a blessing through the nation Israel. And so it is our duty to pray for the Jews. Why should we pray for Israel and Jerusalem, especially Jerusalem? Why we should pray? Because God has commanded us to do that. Because we are commanded to do it. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you, holy city. That's seen in Psalms 83. Remember that Jerusalem is God's eternal city and it has been given to the Jews as an eternal covenant. We cannot forget that. Jerusalem is God's eternal city and it has been given to the Jews as an eternal covenant. That we have to realize and we have to understand, if we are Bible-believing Christians, we have to understand that city God is not going to give to anyone else, because that is His own city. It is God's own city, and it was given to the Jewish nation as an eternal covenant and as an eternal city for them, which continues into the millennium and into the eternal state that we see the New Jerusalem coming down to this earth. Remember that Jerusalem is God's eternal city, and it has been given to the Jews as an eternal covenant. That does not mean that we should not pray for the Palestinian people. That does not mean that we have to reject the Palestinian people because they are going against Israel. No, we have to pray for them. We have to pray for the Palestinian people and for their salvation. It is the radical groups that are fighting against Israel and not the innocent people of Palestine. Please understand, the war that is going now, that was going on for almost 15 days, from May 10th, when Hamas started rocketing Israel. You should understand, it is not the Palestinian people who are culpable there, who are responsible for that. It is the Hamas, the radical group, which has one agenda only, to wipe out Israel from the face of the earth and take Jerusalem as their own. That is their only objective. And you should understand that they launched the missiles. The missile launchers are right in the civilian population. That means where innocent people are living, and they use women and children, even newborn babies, mothers with newborn babies and children and elderly people as human shields when Israel attacks. And Israel makes sure that they don't kill any civilians. And we should understand what the media is telling us is not the actual fact. You should understand, when they almost 1,300, total during this period, they almost 4,300 rockets. That means 4,300 rockets were fired into Israel, and because of Israel's defense system called the Iron Dome, they could 90% of that they could destroy it. But the funny thing is that when they sent almost 1,300 rockets into Israel, almost 200 did not leave Gaza. It fell down into the civilian population and killed. So when you listen to the news and see that the Palestinians have been killed, understand the civilians have been killed. It is not by Israel. They pinpointed, their target was pinpointed to their offices, where they were hiding, the metro tunnels that they had built, almost 650 kilometers of that they were using to come and rocket Israel cities. That is the target that they have destroyed, and the number of Palestinians that has died, majority of that, 80% of that was Hamas leaders and Palestinian jihadist group leaders. So you should understand that we do not believe all that the mainline news tells, especially Al Jazeera. It is the radical groups that are fighting against Israel and not the innocent people of Palestine. So we have to pray for their salvation too. So we have to pray for the salvation of these radical groups too. They did not understand what they are doing, because they are the proxies of another country which is part of the group that is going to come against Israel in the Gog-Magog war in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. That is Persia. It will join with Russia and Turkey and Sudan and Libya against Israel during that Gog-Magog war. So they are all these fringe groups, Hamas and Hezbollah and Palestinian jihadist group. They are all the proxies of the Iranian regime. But the Iranian people are innocent. You should understand there is almost 1 million Christians in Iran. In the midst of this kind of regime, there is 1 million Iranians. So we should pray for them too. So we have to pray for their salvation too. We also have to share the gospel to the Jews. So that you might be wondering why. Why should we share the gospel to the Jews? Paul says so. But now, let me read that verse. But now I am speaking to you who are Gentiles, inasmuch then as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry in the hope of somehow making my fellow countrymen jealous by stirring up so that they will seek the truth and perhaps save some of them. Romans 11:13 to 14 from the Amplified Version. So, as Paul tells, we have to share the gospel to the Jews, and we have to share. And you have to understand that there are a lot of Jews who have become believers, and they are very good believers. And I personally watch one believer's channel called Behold Israel. That's Amir Safrati. You should understand he is a major. His designation is a major in the Israeli Defense Force, and he was the last deputy governor of Jericho before it was handed to the Arabs. And you should understand that when I tell about Jericho, the first governor of Jericho was Joshua of the Bible, and the last deputy governor was Amir Safrati. He came to the saving knowledge of Christ, and he understood that the Messiah that had come 2000 years ago was the real Messiah. Now he is defending that faith, and he has a channel called Behold Israel. Please go and watch that, and you can get the actual news of what's happening in Israel in comparison with the biblical prophecies that is being fulfilled right in front of our eyes. So please don't believe everything blindly. When you read the Bible that's why how important the prophetical books concerning the second coming of Christ is so much relevant for us today. The fact is that what is happening in Middle East surrounding Israel and her neighbors is what we see as a fulfillment of Jesus' second coming in a wider way. So what is the conclusion of chapter 25? The underlying messages of chapter 24 and 25. Now with all the wickedness removed in the various judgments at the second coming or the second advent of Jesus Christ, the kingdom will begin on earth for 1,000 years with only saved individuals in physical bodies constituting the earthly kingdom as the king's subjects. So who are allowed, that means the sheep and the Jews, the 1/3 Jews, that was in this interpretation, the 1/3 Jews, that is referring to in the two parables, the 10 virgins and the talents, and the judgment of the nations. The sheep will enter into the millennial kingdom, the earthly kingdom, as the kings, as Jesus, as the King of Kings subjects. Glorified saints from Old Testament times and the church, the bride of Christ, will also share in the reign of the King of Kings. We know that we are going to be the bride of Christ. We, the church, are going to reign with Jesus Christ on this earth for 1,000 years. So through these two chapters, Jesus answers the questions of his disciples about the sign of his coming and the end of the ages. Chapter 24 verse 4 to 31. Jesus also gave practical lessons for those who will be living at that time. So this is the interpretations. 24 verse 32 to 51. Encouraging them to faithfulness, watchfulness and preparedness. By way of application, all these lessons that Jesus spoke are relevant to all believers in any age. So Jesus then concludes by pointing out the establishment of his kingdom and the judgment of the Jews. chapter 25 verse 1 to 30, and of the Gentiles, chapter 25 verse 31 to 36. So what we have to understand is that Jesus is speaking to his disciples exactly in the context of a Galilean wedding ceremony and the Galilean custom of his time. Why he spoke in that manner? Because the disciples, all the disciples were from Galilee. They were Galileans and they were familiar with it. For this, we have to understand what a Galilean wedding is. In that Facebook post, I had attached a link to YouTube for you to understand what is actually a Galilean wedding. It's a documentary movie called Before the Wrath. It is completely based, it is actually supporting the pre-tribulation rapture, and it's speaking exactly on this subject, this Galilean wedding. So it is exactly according to the Galilean wedding that Jesus has spoken these two chapters, because the disciples understood that. We'll see that Galilean wedding, the details in the next episode. Why I shared with you this interpretation is that we should know that especially in the second coming of Jesus Christ, there are many views. The pre-tribulation rapture, there is pre-millennial, pre-tribulation rapture, then there is the mid-tribulation rapture, then there is the midway, there is another another rapture. It's called the pre-wrath rapture. That means before the wrath. That means the second 3.5 years, the middle of the second 3.5 years, and the last one, the fourth view, is the post-tribulation rapture. That means the saints will be raptured after the tribulation, after 7 years of tribulation, which we will see. All these views we will see in the later studies. When you come to the study of the rapture, we'll deal with that in a later sense. But here, I just wanted to show you that interpretations can go wrong, even if you do a critical study. If you do a critical approach, that means you do a critical approach according to historical and cultural context, everything comes into play, and we try to interpret it in that way. But there is a danger to that also. It is not that it is a right approach, but there is a danger to that we tend to go overboard in our understanding of the passages, and we cannot pluck out a passage and compare it with that and try to establish our viewpoint on the basis of that. No, there are many parallel passages that actually speaks about that, and we have to understand that, and we have to learn that, and that's how a good student of the Bible should be. You should not believe every single teaching that is being taught you. It is every single person who handles this word of God as a preacher and a teacher can go wrong. They are not perfect. God allows that. God allows us to make mistakes, but it is the role of each one of us to discern about it. Why I am telling this is that because for some time I also held to this interpretation that chapter 25 was speaking and the 10 virgins were speaking about the Jewish people. But when God put into my heart to write a book on the second coming of Jesus Christ, in order for me to be able to go and prepare the bride of Christ for the second coming, so I started reading, getting into more deeply into the study of the second coming. And I wrote a book called the Last Tick on the Global Clock. It is a study into the second coming of Jesus Christ. So that's a study that I'm doing now. This Matthew 24 and 25, I just added into that in the series that I'm doing now, because there is a tendency for us to, what do you say, go the wrong way in understanding the passages of the Bible, especially when Jesus spoke of the Olivet Discourse. So in the next episode, I'll explain the actual true fact of it. So I held on to that, but when I started studying that, I understood that that is not the actual viewpoint that that Jesus was speaking about. So we'll see in the next episode. So you listen to this, and if you get a chance, watch that documentary movie called Before the Wrath. In the YouTube, I think it is The Rapture and the Galilean Wedding or something like that. I'll try to put a link into this episode, so you will understand that. You can go and check that. You will understand exactly what Jesus was speaking to his disciples when they asked that question in chapter 24, the beginning, verse 3. So I hope you will be blessed by this, and I hope you will listen to this and critically evaluate if this is what Jesus is speaking there. And it is up to you to hold on to this interpretation or reject it. That is up to you. Because I just want to educate you, I want to teach you and show you that there are many interpretations floating around in the theological field. So you have to understand what is right, because our standard is always the Bible, and we have to compare it with the Bible and see if what that teaching is saying is the absolute truth or it's a lie. So that's what my intention is through this series, and I hope you will be blessed by this series, and I hope you will pray for me, because I want to actually go back into the field and share the gospel to the people who have not heard, that's the unreached people of this world. So that's my calling, and at the same time God has put a burden for me to prepare the bride of Christ for the second coming of Christ, which is very, very, very near, as every single world events point towards that. But we do not know the hour, the day, the hour, or the time. So every single moment of our life, we are supposed to be prepared for it, because we do not know when the trumpet is going to sound. I hope you will not be left behind. And those who have not accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, please do not postpone it, because tomorrow will be too late. Maybe tonight will be too late. Let it be that instant itself, when you listen to this message, give your heart to Jesus Christ, because He's waiting for you to ask Him to come into His life. And He will come, and He will change you and transform you completely, totally into a new person, and will ensure that you will have eternal life. And He will protect you from all the things that's going on in this world, and He will comfort you and give you the grace to go through any kind of pandemics, any kind of situations in life, and He will take you through and bring you safely to the other shore called heaven. May God bless you all.